Hi, bonjour, welcome everybody. My name is Milena Audino. I'm the Business Information Officer here at the World Trade Center, Winnipeg. I would like to begin today's webinar with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Innu, Denesilan, and Dakota Oyate nations. We acknowledge we're also on the homelands of the Red River Métis and that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. The World Trade Center Winnipeg team respects the treaties that were made on these territories and acknowledges the harms and mistakes of the past and present throughout our nation. Thank you for joining our webinar, EPR 101, What Extended Producer Responsibility Means for Your Business, which will be presented by Michael Hall with Reclay Steward Edge. Please, before we begin, I want to share just a few housekeeping items. So number one, please send all of your webinar questions directly to the chat box at the top of your screen, and they'll try to answer as many questions as they can. And we also are going to have a Q&A at the end. Number two, for all logistical questions, send them in the chat box, and I will try my best to answer them as soon as possible as well. And lastly, you'll receive a PDF copy and a recording of this presentation within the next week. So now it's time to start our webinar. I want to introduce you to Michael Hall. So Michael has an extensive expertise in supply chain and project management as an experienced consultant. And he applies his skills to deliver strategic, operational, and technical insights across both public and private sectors. He is a certified PMP and holds an MBA from the U of M, where he also teaches business-related courses. So welcome, Michael. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hopefully I can shed some light on what extended producer responsibility is and what it means for your business today. So, yes, thank you for that great intro. My name is Mike. I've been a consultant with Reclay Steward Edge for almost 6 years now. Most of my time I've been dealing with compliance and reporting, as well as policy monitoring and staying on top of new changes in legislation when it comes to extended producer responsibility. The company I work for, Reclay Steward Edge, we are quite a large company. We're based in Germany. We have offices, of course, here in Toronto and in Winnipeg here. We also have an office in the United States and all over Europe. So we have, one of our main services is consulting within the EPR sphere all over with Europe, United States, and here in Canada. So I think the first slide is a little bit of a history of EPR. What is extended producer responsibility? So going back a little bit, I'm going to kind of go off the slide here a little bit and just talk about the origins of EPR. So it started in Europe. And it spread here to Canada. And actually, British Columbia is one of the first non-European jurisdictions that really embraced EPR and extended producer responsibility. And what EPR is all about, it really is shifting financial and management responsibility away from taxpayers and onto producers. Brand owners, first importers, and manufacturers is the definition of what we say when we say producers. And so before EPR, the financing for waste and recycling was primarily done through taxpayers. So through property taxes, special municipal levies, sorts of taxation that funds waste and recycling, until a shift was happening in the 90s, and it's made its way here to Manitoba now over the next couple of years. That shift, that financial shift, is going from municipalities to producers. So producer pay. Lots of reasons behind this. We'll talk about that in this presentation, but that is the core, I'd say, core thesis of extended producer responsibility is really the shifting the responsibilities of recycling and waste to the producer, and completing that circle of circular economy. So when we look at this, we look at it as identifying end-of-life management of products as the responsibility of producers, brand owners, first importers, manufacturers, who fits that definition of producers. The funding is provided by the producers. However, costs can be internalized by those producers or passed on to customers, which we see a lot in different EPR products. So the legislation, it's EPR is a framework, a legislative framework that holds businesses accountable for the entire life cycle of products. And some people say, cradle to grave, but we like to say cradle to cradle, all the way around. And I'll go through that circular economy in a little bit here. But it aims, there's lots of motivation behind it, but it really does, a lot of the emphasis is put onto producers to reduce packaging waste, increase better packaging, sustainable designs with their packaging, to reduce costs that will be associated with EPR. But looking over at this circular diagram here, producer sustainability designs and manufactures the product and packaging. The product is shipped and sold. The consumer, we use the product. So technically at that point, product is end of life. In traditional, you throw it and dispose of the packaging. If it's a single-use product, we use the product, we discard it. And it's up to municipalities to cover the cost of what happens after that. EPR, that producer is still responsible as it goes through the final stages. So product is collected and returned to the producer, and the product is prepared for reuse or recycled appropriately. So it's that continuation, that circular continuation of producer responsibility. Why EPR? A lot of different reasons have happened, especially now in our current landscape. We're seeing EPR grow in many different products, and in the United States, it's just catching on now with Oregon, with packaging. Oregon EPR is the reports are due in a few days actually for Oregon. But a lot of different backdrop issues that happen, global marine plastics issues. We hear a lot about plastics in our oceans, plastics in our landfill. So that has really spurred on a lot of the plastic packaging EPRs that we see today. Different CSR, business CSR ESG positioning with companies. The scarcity or lack of availability of raw materials. And we're seeing this, virgin plastics are becoming more costly. So producers and manufacturers that deal in the plastics landscape are looking for that feedstock to come back through EPR systems rather than purchasing virgin plastic materials. Limited landfill capacity and acceptance. Of course, financial interests. So we're taking the burden off taxpayers and putting the burden of recycling onto the producers of that material. So producer pays or polluter pays mentality. There's environmental interests, of course, that we've talked about with plastics being in the forefront, single-use plastic bans, and all of these things are happening. Consumers, clients, of course, voters are leaning towards having producers and manufacturers and brand owners cover the costs of the recycling of their products. And then, of course, sourcing these materials has been an issue as well too. Benefits. So there is some benefits for producers in an EPR system. It allows producers to take control of, when we say their materials, it's going to a shared material feedstock that then comes back, recovered through curbside collection. It allows producers to better manage the costs for recycling. And of course, mentioned before, EPR is an alternative to direct government intervention and taxpayers financing the recycling systems. I wanted to mention a few key EPR principles, or we would say best practices for EPR. So a clear scope and fairness between different products and producers. So a level playing field. That's very important as well. Producer governance, not governance by other parties, but those producers have a say in how their materials are going through the EPR systems. That's very important. Governments can set minimum targets of recovery, or recycling targets, and then get out of the way. It really is important that producers are part of the design of the rulemaking of EPR systems and frameworks, as well as participating and facilitating the EPR programs, transparency of performance data, and where their costs are going to. So give me 1 second here. EPR is based on producer paying those funds by material and those fees by material types. And we always look for best practices in EPR, that transparency of the performance, the recovery, as well as the use of those fees. Fees applied by specific material types. And this comes into, quite a good focus when we're dealing with packaging, whether it's plastics or fibers, and printed paper EPR that we see across Canada. And one that Reclay Stewart Edge, we're very involved with the packaging and printed paper EPR for our clients. But the fees are applied by material types, no cross-subsidization between the materials, and the use of funds for the stated purpose of the legislation. So looking in Canada, in Manitoba, and in Canada as well, there is a growing environmental awareness driving EPR expansion and the circular economy. It's buzzwords, lots of webinars, as this one is. A lot of business owners are interested in what EPR means to them as a company. How much is it going to cost? What's the expectations and obligations of business owners and businesses as well? So it's the awareness is growing. The learning opportunities for EPR are expanding as well. Producers also face higher customer expectations and a competitive advantage and edge if they comply. And we're seeing companies now that are non-compliant, larger companies being shamed, I guess you'd say, in a public forum, saying, this company is non-compliant in their packaging, and it's put onto the internet, it's put onto the into those industry news sites. So customer expectations are shifting towards where are these plastics going? What is the company doing for these plastics? What are we doing as a community with these plastics? It's important to note that EPR is currently regulated at a provincial level. So Manitoba we have our legislation, and each province has similar legislation for EPR when we're talking about plastics and packaging and printed paper, with variations. So some materials are obligated in some provinces and some materials are not. So there is some variation still. It applies to a variety of products. So like I said, my expertise is in packaging and printed paper and beverage containers. However, I'll go over the list. EPR here in Manitoba does apply to a variety of different products. This presentation is geared towards Canadian business. However, EPR responsibilities are international, fairly complex, depending on what EPR program you're interested in. And I did want to mention at this point that 5 states in the US have adopted packaging and printed paper EPR. So if you are businesses that are selling into the United States, there will be some obligations, going forth, and it's growing in the U.S. as well. It's state-run; it's not federal in the United States. So each state, just like here in Canada, with each of our provinces, we're designing and writing up our EPR legislation. So some of the EPR programs in Manitoba here: packaging, printed paper. We have electronics, batteries, paint, household hazardous, tires, oil, containers and their filters, medical sharps and pharmaceuticals, fluorescent lights, mercury thermostats, lead acid batteries, and of course, ag when we're talking with grain bags and baler twine and chemical containers. So it's quite a wide variety of EPR programs here in Manitoba. And across Canada, we see very similar groupings of these products coast to coast. And each province will have its own legislation dealing with these EPR programs. So focusing in just with packaging and printed paper. So this is plastic packaging. This is fiber packaging. We have metals. We have as well in some jurisdictions beverage containers that fall into packaging and printed paper. Looking across Canada, this is going to be a coast-to-coast EPR. So as I said earlier, British Columbia was kind of the original EPR for PPP, and it's come coast to coast. Here in Manitoba, we're having a transitional period right now. It was traditionally mainly funded by municipalities, and 70–80% funded by municipalities, and that's switching to full EPR, fully funded by producers here in Manitoba. And it's going over a few years transitional period. You see that happening in Saskatchewan, in Ontario, and in Quebec. This transition from municipal taxpayers paid recycling programs and waste and recycling curbside over to a producer paid residential blue box programs. And you can see it really is in every jurisdiction. The very few that don't have PPP EPR in place, Newfoundland, Northwest Territories, and Prince Edward Island, they're either monitoring activities and will most likely this year start that stakeholder discussion and consultation, or already in those discussions to implement a EPR program for packaging. So upcoming trends and upcoming, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a question on that.
Yeah.
So does that mean if the province is moving over to the producer paid system for recycling, will more items be then accepted, or is there a problem still with our processing of said recyclable?
Yeah, there might be more. There might be more items being accepted into the residential streams. However, it really does depend on a lot of different factors. When let's say, everybody always goes to coffee cups, the Tim Hortons, the Starbucks coffee cups. Why are they not recyclable? What's going on with them? And it does come to multiple factors: cost of processing those items, commodity markets, who's there to purchase those once we as a community recycle them, and can our material recycling facilities be able to adjust and adapt to accept new streams of materials that come into the residential blue box programs that we have here in Manitoba. So it possibly, I think, as EPR is growing and it's transitioning to producer paid, less financial burdens on the municipalities, that may open more materials being accepted into the. It still needs that, the rest of the pieces to fall into place.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And that's another. Provincial jurisdiction differences. You can have coffee, going back to coffee cups and that material, that plastic lined, paper material, fiber material. Certain jurisdictions can accept that into their recycling stream, and certain jurisdictions can't. And another great example of that is glass. Some jurisdictions have the processes in place and have the end markets in place for glass, and others don't. So it is difficult for us consumers to know, when we're trying to recycle at source, what is acceptable, what isn't. But hopefully, with the growth of EPR and that financial burden being taken off municipalities, there might be some opportunities there for expanding our materials. Trends, there's a lot of things happening, of course, a lot of changes happening. We have federal plastics registry, which could be a whole other topic for everybody, but they're trying to push for harmonization. We have different provinces that are slowly coming together in their EPR programs and trying to make that harmonization of reporting for producers, make it easier for producers to report on their annual weights, depending on, what EPR program they're in. Kind of leading, from our last conversation there, expanded product categories. Hopefully new materials are possible under new regulations. We're hearing a lot about textiles coming into place. There could be furniture, industrial packaging. We'll see where those EPR scopes, where we can increase. People have been talking about lots of different products coming in, solar panels, endless on potential opportunities for new expanded product categories. There is, in areas and jurisdictions where existing EPR is obligated, producers are obligated, we're seeing a lot more authoritative agencies that are really looking into producers, making sure they're compliant. And we're seeing a step up in that, stricter penalties, stronger compliance, and a bit of a push for non-compliant companies to get on board. And these agencies across Canada are reaching out to producers, to companies, questioning if they're obligated for those EPRs. So we're seeing stronger reporting requirements and compliance requirements for producers across Canada. And I can see that shift happening here in Manitoba as well, as that financial burden is being placed from municipalities to producers. It's up to the agencies to have stronger enforcement and requirements for those producers to fund those waste and recycling programs. We mentioned this before too, the circular economy focus, more incentives for businesses, whether that's public relations, customers, or more internal, CSR, more incentives, more motivation to reduce waste at the source and to be compliant with these EPR programs. Here in Manitoba, we talked about a little bit about that shift that's happening here in Manitoba for packaging and printed paper, PPP programs through MMSM and circular materials. There might be possible expansion here in Manitoba to new product categories. Textiles comes up again as well, mattresses, and more possibilities, and increased government oversight, which is across Canada, coast to coast, stronger enforcement and reporting standards for businesses. So what does this mean for you guys? What does this mean for businesses here in Manitoba and across Canada? We're looking at what right now, next steps. What can we do as businesses? What should we be doing? I think one of the first steps is each business that sells in those product categories, sells products in those categories, takes a look at their material usage and first determine if they're obligated. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just had a really quick question. So like how much more would you say like around the cost would be to add to the producer?
There will be an increase.
Okay.
Yeah, for here in Manitoba, as an example, EEQ, based out of the Quebec EPR program that for packaging and printed paper that EEQ runs, they're looking at about a double in producer costs with their switch. So I think Manitoba businesses need to be prepared for cost increases, most definitely, as that burden is shifted to them. What exactly percentage or how many, we're still going to see that, but if we're benchmarking with Quebec, they're doubling about in their producer fees.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Having said that, there is thresholds, de minimis, small business exclusions, and I think that's important for you as business owners or looking at businesses that you may not be compliant in the EPR system right now, looking at what their material usage is. So understanding what their packaging weights would be for the packaging and printed paper EPRs, or what if that EPR program even has small business exclusions, and determining whether they're obligated or not. And I think that's the first step for all the businesses that are actively selling in these different sectors, is to take a look at financials. There's revenue thresholds, and there is tonnage thresholds, so the amount of material that's being placed into the residential blue box when we're talking about packaging. Each of those different product EPR has their own legislation, their own regulations for whether your company is obligated to be part of that EPR, or if there is. Not all programs have small business exclusions, but a lot of the larger EPR programs do. So it's something, first step is to assess your company and see if you fall within that small business exclusion, or if you truly are obligated to be part of the EPR program that you're interested in. I think if you are obligated, or if you're, moving towards that direction with increase of sales, something to look at is strategic packaging design. A lot of companies are switching the materials they use in their packaging, trying to lessen the weight of their packaging. We saw that with Amazon, trying to reduce the cardboard inside of the cardboard inside of the cardboard. They're really trying to reduce their packaging, and a big push is the fees that are associated with that packaging materials that are placed into the residential market. If you are, or you determine yourself obligated, I think the next step is to really reach out to the agencies that are running the programs, the EPR programs, because it's better to get yourself registered and start reporting rather than being non-compliant and them coming after you. They also can go back pay and ask for the last 4 years of your materials, and so non-compliance could be costly in the long run. Second. And that follows the being proactive, considering waste reduction strategies, and to avoid higher fees, looking at links in with the strategic packaging and product design choices. And then regulations are evolving here in Manitoba, across Canada, the United States. The EU has just passed new directives on packaging as well in different EPR programs. So staying informed, understanding what is coming down the pipeline for businesses, knowing regulations, knowing legislation, knowing EPR really gains you an advantage as business owners. Reclay Steward Edge, we do have a lot of these services that businesses are interested in. We do compliance and EPR strategy as well, something that is our bread and butter. That's a very, very high level EPR overview. We can go dive deep into each one of those product categories, including print, packaging and printed paper. There's lots of variations between provinces, but hopefully that gave you guys a good high level aerial view of extended producer responsibility and what that means for you as business owners.
Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome.
I don't know if anybody has any questions, but they can also feel free to unmute themselves, or if you feel more comfortable just doing it in the chat box, you could do so as well.
Sure. I think I'll stop sharing just so I'm able to see. Yeah. Thanks.
I was going to say, I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If we're seeing like provinces are working towards their own ERP, and I'm assuming maybe potentially at some point Canada might have more of a national ERP program,
right.
Within that be looking at trying to maybe not allow the product to be produced or sold in Canada if we can't recycle it?
Yeah, there's been lots of talk about that actually, or toxic, toxic products. PFAS is the big buzzword right now, where that actually has a lot of toxicity in PFAS plastics, and they're trying to ban that, or at least report that. The problem with when we look at what is recyclable, what isn't recyclable when it comes to general plastics or different pieces, components of packaging is 1 year they could be recyclable. Here in Manitoba, we see this up and down of what is recyclable, what isn't, and I think that's a great idea, like prohibiting certain plastics, and that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's what's already, sort of in the works with certain types of PVC, certain types of those hard to recycle materials. But right now, no, they just charge a higher fee. And then that's a way of hopefully pushing producers to stay away from using that in their packaging designs, is if they're costly per kilogram, or cent per kilogram or cent per gram. We're hoping EPR, the whole framework of EPR, is to stay away from those hard to recycle materials.
Okay. Sorry, I think someone else might have had a question. I thought they were off mic, but are there specific products potentially right now in Canada, or it's maybe more Manitoba, that would be a focus of bringing in next? I think you had a slide of a bit on that, where Manitoba was focusing on a couple of things. And
Right. Well, I can see a general trend across North America is textiles. A lot of people are talking about those, fast fashion. What are we doing with our clothes? They're piling up in landfills. How is this going to work? Will big fashion companies be on the hook for their materials that they're selling in retail stores? So it'll be interesting to see where textiles are going, because that'll affect all of us. We'll go shopping for our clothes, and will there be an environmental levy or fee put onto every shirt or pair of jeans we buy? And so it'll be interesting to see the EPR framework for textiles and moving forward with that.
We do know of one company in Manitoba that has produced more environmentally friendly materials, and reaccepts their clothing and recycles their scraps and such. So we know they're focusing and moving that way, so that they could sleep at night. But it'll be interesting.
Ahead of the curve for sure.
Yeah, they definitely are. But it would be interesting to see what does happen with everyone else.
For sure. And I think that topic of trying to be ahead of the curve, I mean, even existing EPR programs that we have in Manitoba here, packaging and printed paper, if you're a small business that's growing rapidly and you already know your packaging, maybe for affordability reasons, you're buying whatever that cheapest packaging you can get to procure, put your product in and ship out, but that might not be the best product that is going home with customers. Being ahead of that as you're growing, because here in Manitoba, the current threshold is 1 million in gross revenue. So 1 million gross revenue sales, or 750,000 kilograms of packaging per year. So if you're a company that's 800,000, 900,000 in revenue, a few good months could push you over for next year's obligations. So it's good to kind of be aware of what's happening, and that goes across usually about 1 metric ton or 1 million in revenue. Is other provinces ebb and flow a bit on that, 1.5 in tonnage, but that's a good estimate for businesses that are selling into other provinces as well too. And the United States are pretty much following that. A little bit higher revenue, 5 million so far in Oregon, global sales, with one tonnage of.
And sorry, I'm just going to keep asking questions unless someone else has one. So we know Europe is the leader, or has been the leader, of ERP. How much different is that versus what we've seen in the province?
Right. It used to be a lot different. And I think we're playing catch up with a lot of what we see in Europe. Where Europe still has over Manitoba is more obligated materials. They have a wider breadth of products that are part of some sort of EPR program. They're national, so each country will have their own EPR programs rather than how we are provincial. So that harmonizes a bit for each
Much
per
better,
country.
yeah.
Yeah, much better, I think in some ways easier to understand for producers that are selling into Europe. You know, they also have a few more product categories within each of those EPR. So if we go back to packaging, they'll have a bit more breakout of different materials. So here in Canada, we usually have quite, your 7 plastics will be organized by plastics. We're not breaking it apart into resin types as much as Europe has in certain EPR jurisdictions there, but we're moving towards that. The Federal Plastics Registry is the newest right now, where they're taking what we already report in Manitoba on the plastics we report for our clients. They're asking for a bit more specific resin type out of those plastics. So it'll be interesting to see, where we go with that. But I think we always say about 10 years behind Europe. So when it comes to EPR, so we see new changes that are happening in Europe. Usually takes that much time, and to see in Ontario and British Columbia have been kind of the leading jurisdictions where the rest of Canada falls after British Columbia and Ontario's rules.
I have a question actually. It's just in terms of like monitoring. So I don't know if there is like is there a system that exists, I guess, for businesses so that they can kind of keep track and report, I guess, their waste under EPR? Like I don't know if there's one specific framework in Manitoba or
there is. We have a packaging and printed paper that deals with residential waste. MMSM is they run that program, and their service provider is Circular Materials. And so when businesses here in Manitoba or businesses that are resident in Manitoba that are selling, meeting that threshold, small businesses, they're excluded from EPR in waste. But once you hit that threshold, you need to register and start reporting based on weight calculations. And there is service providers like Reclay Stewart Edge that do those calculations and understand what those EPR, what the legislation is asking for, and being able to report on behalf of companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a question on that. You said that they could go back of up to 4 years for fees. So is that caught as part of the CRA program, or how is the monitoring of the registration and the fees and such?
Most provinces aren't. I'll rephrase that. Ontario and Quebec have been notoriously very proactive on looking at large companies. So they usually look at the revenue stream, which needs to be reported for any public company, and looking at, okay, this is a large retailer, let's say, and they're not listed as a steward. They haven't registered or reported in Ontario or Quebec. They'll reach out to those businesses asking if they, if it looks like you are obligated for packaging in Ontario, please register and send appropriate information, meaning you got caught being non-compliant. If that's the case, they often ask, well, how long have you been non-compliant for? So they'll want sales totals and weights of what goes into residential waste streams, that's at home, going back 4 or 5 years, depending on what the agencies decide. So it's better to be proactive as a business, knowing that they probably are obligated, registering and just getting that reporting done, rather than being approached by these agencies and having to, deal with that. Always
cheaper to do it right the first time than wait and get caught and pay all the fines and everything. So money up front is better on that part.
Exactly.
So is that potentially why we see I'm going to name drop some companies now. Like Sleep Country collects the old mattresses. Like you get a new mattress, they take the old mattress back. Xerox and all those other photocopiers that they take back their cartridges. Is that part of that, or is that just them automatically doing that because it just makes sense?
It could be both. It could be part of their internal company belief system, CSR, what they believe as a corporate social responsibility that they do. As some are mandated. So certain electronics, let's say you can buy at Best Buy, and they'll accept cell phones and electronics back because they're following under the EPRA, which is the electronics EPR. And we've known as Manitobans, we've paid anytime we buy TVs, computers, cell phones, we'll have a little environmental fee that's on that helps fund that EPR program. And part of that program is retailers being able to accept back. And so these products, so they'll accept them back, also brings your customer back to go buy the new one, right? So it makes business sense. And then a representative would pick up those electronics and continue that circular economy of those. So they'll be broken apart. What can be reused and new electronics would be reused, or whatever the commodity streams would go from on our old cell phones, let's say. So, yeah. So it could be both. It depends if that product is legislated. If it's legislated, it could be part of that EPR program that they must accept back used products, or it could be just a company alignment on their values. As you mentioned, that clothing textile manufacturer who's already, I mean, that's going to be an internal corporate, sustainability approach, which is fantastic to see. And if textiles becomes legislated across Canada or in provincial jurisdictions or even the United States where they're selling to, who knows, they're already ahead of that. So it's good.
Yeah, that one specific is as they said, they want to sleep at night, feel good that they're not polluting and all that stuff. So
yeah. And Manitoba, we also have Mother Earth Recycling, who what they do is it's a great circular economy. They're part of it, and it not necessarily is it mandated by legislation. I mean, they do follow with electronics you can bring back, and mattresses. They have that program as well. But it also it just in trying to divert from landfill and when government funding is there for organizations to be part of the circular economy, whether it's subsidies or whatever it would be, it just adds employment for people, and it's just a great fit into that circular economy. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Did somebody else have any questions? Just in case.
I think that might be it. I'll post some of the our upcoming events that we have in the chat box. But yeah, thank you to everybody who joined this webinar, and then thank you, Michael, again. This was a very insightful presentation, so we appreciate you being here. But yeah, thank you for your of course, thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll see you online again soon.
Sounds great.
All right, take care, everybody.